So the things that we wanted to, this is what I would like to do, the interview questions, the live gig, like where you go see a gig, and then I want to do textual analysis as well. Yeah. The one that textual analysis, because you said you have to have secondary research. Yeah. How would I go about that? Because you put on the feedback, don't use online sources. So how would I go about finding?
What did you write about?
It was the hey. Or can you carry on doing the task?
You can, yeah, that's completely fine.
Was that okay? Like what I did so far in that, or
just tell me.
It was the hey by
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Said, like, they were stood like how the Beatles were stood in the Ed Sullivan Show and things like that. You're analysing the video. Yeah, and I spoke about the lyrics as well, and you were like, I'll just focus on one thing. Yeah.
Which are you more sort of drawn to write about, the video or the song? I mean, you can do both, but it might be a bit too big a task.
Maybe the lyrics then.
Yeah.
Probably talk about
maybe the lyrics and kind of instrumentation.
Yeah.
And so on. Yeah.
So just talk about that, and then how would I get secondary research?
Well, I mean, the kind of thing.
Books wise.
Yeah, exactly. Go to the library, find books. Now, one way. I mean, this is a good book because it gives you a kind of history of kind of pop music. Now, obviously, big book, but it's in kind of chronological order. So once you get to the end, there's a chapter on R&B.
Okay.
So if you kind of read this, and he's kind of talking about how R&B is a very old term, rhythm and blues. It goes back to the 50s, really. So he's talking about how, in the 90s, what I used to call soul music was kind of reinvented as kind of R&B, and it became the mainstream music, and it was kind of fused with hip hop, whereas in the 80s, kind of hip hop and soul or R&B were kind of separate. The artists didn't appear on each other's records. So if you read this,
is that book in the library?
Yeah, it is. Cool. Yeah. Bob Stanley.
Cool.
You could just make the point that, in a sense, this is kind of Outcast. This is what would that have been, late 90s?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So it fits into a kind of a sort of wider trend. Just the idea that this was. I mean, R&B is because that's an unusual record in some ways, but nevertheless, you could think of them as hip hop R&B.
Yeah.
Just make the point that they were part of this wider trend in which kind of R&B and hip hop were increasingly kind of fused into one style.
Okay. So textual can be like lyrics, the video, like an album cover.
Yeah.
Because I think I might do like an album cover.
Good. Yeah.
Can that? Does that? So it's not just the text there. It's like the picture. And...
Yeah. It's when we say text, we mean just anything which conveys a meaning.
I mean, that's like the block in my mind.
Yeah.
It's like text.
But, text is. It's a strange term. In kind of cultural studies, text means a collection of signs. So that includes, if you think about an album cover, that's kind of the any words that are there, any photos or other images, the kind of font, colour scheme, etc. So that would work. Which particular cover? Anyone in mind?
I haven't chosen one yet, but there's like a few that I would be interested in doing.
Yeah. It's a nice task because it's manageable and you can go into a lot of detail with it. I think in terms of secondary research, so library books, see what's been written on album covers. If you can't find anything specifically on album covers, try and find some things on graphic design and the importance.
Yeah, so quite like the Pink Floyd kind of, that the triangular.
Yeah. So Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah. Or maybe one of the Black Sabbath albums. I'm not sure.
I'm not so familiar with their album covers, I have to say. I know the music, but I'm less familiar with the album covers. But yeah. Yeah.
But the Pink Floyd one might be good, because there must be some on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is, one of the most famous album covers in the history of music, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
So there, I suppose what's a few things that you might want to pick up on. It was worth thinking of it partly as a physical artefact. So it was a double, it was a gatefold sleeve, even though it's it's not a double album. Didn't have the band's name on the cover. It was quite unusual at the time, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point.
and that's kind of interesting, that in a sense it was a kind of artistic statement, and that sort of ties into genre, doesn't it? That in a sense this is prog rock and therefore serious music and those kinds of things. So see what people have written about that album cover. You can sort of, I think with that kind of analysis, the first thing to do is just describe what you see or describe what you hear.
Yeah.
And then, having done that, think about the wider meanings.
Why have they done that?
So genre and, how it connects to the kind of the music industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then for the interview questions, I've done like 5 interviews with like completely different kind of ages.
Okay, brilliant.
So how would we go about kind of summarising it? Like, would you kind of group them all together and say this is what I found from a group?
This question, or
I would go, rather than go question by question, I would start by introducing your topic. So what was the general theme of your kind of interviews? Were they about
we've kept the childhood question, and then we've just because we did the questions together originally in class, and then we've gone away and we've like made our questions better, but individually.
Great.
So they are
if I remember rightly, that was about kind of how people's taste has changed.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And what they're into now, what they're into, as a child.
Yeah.
And how it's kind of changed over the last 5 years.
Yeah. So the way to structure it would be to introduce the topic. Okay, so how people's taste in music has changed during their lifetime. Introduce the interviewees, name, age, occupation, etc. Anything that might be kind of relevant in terms of how you interpret what they said. And
should we do that as in something that's really interesting, or do we have to do every single one? Because you've done five interviews.
Yeah.
So. Oh,
okay. Yeah, you can focus on the most interesting if you want.
Is 5 too many?
No, it's about right, I think. If you need to kind of just discard 1 or 2 if you think you just didn't get anything from them. But 5 is about right, I think.
Okay.
So just introduce them very briefly.
Yeah. A
sentence. And then the main bit of it will be just trying to pick out the common themes. Were there any things that they all kind of said in a roundabout way? There might not be. Sometimes they're just very sort of divergent experiences. So if that's the case, highlight that.
And explain why
person A said this, however, person B said that. So. And then that might be to do, the reason why they said different things might be to do with, any number of things, but it might be to do partly their age or social background, who the kind of significant people in their lives who kind of changed their taste in music. You don't need to kind of, you don't need to go, I wouldn't go question by question, just pick out the most interesting things. Pick out the most interesting things.
Okay.
That's the way to do it. If there's a particular interesting phrase that they use, you can kind of quote directly. You don't need to reference because it's your primary research.
So our interviews, we will add them to an appendix. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not assessed,
and it's not in the word count.
And it's not in the word count. It's useful for me, I suppose, because then if you're kind of saying, you
can show that we picked.
Lots of people said this, and then I can go, did they really? Okay, yes, they did. Yeah. So, and I think it's good practice for you as kind of researchers, because I think when you kind of type up an interview, it gives you a chance to actually kind of process what people have said. I find it very useful. It's a bit time consuming, but I think it does really help you kind of think about, then you can kind of put the transcript side by side and kind of highlight bits and say, oh yeah, that's similar to.
Yeah.
So should we do that as like the next step?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, they just go in an appendix right at the end after the bibliography.
Okay.
And then the live gig, we're going to see a choir in Gloucester.
Interesting.
So do we just write about our experience there?
So it's like first person. So
that's the sort of participant observation.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
So you don't write it as like a gig review, you do what you
So we went there, we spoke to this person as we went into the hall or something like that.
Are you familiar with kind of choral singing? Is that something?
No,
great.
Because honestly, like we were trying to find something that obviously like weren't that much money, tickets and things, and then like to find a time that we both were cool with and all that kind of stuff. And there's a choir on Saturday. It's like for charity and stuff.
Great.
So it's a really good cause.
Yeah.
But so it's something that we're completely not
great.
With,
so that's perfect, because I think the thing to do is to pick up on anything that you consider strange, unusual. Someone who's really used to kind of going to choral, to hearing choirs, they'll just take everything for granted because they're so used to it. You're going to pick up on things, the way the audience behave, how the concert starts, whether people talk in between, how people respond after the music. Do they clap after every single kind of song, or all those things? So write about those kinds of all the details that you consider kind of strange or unusual compared to your kind of experience of music.
I was thinking maybe like trying to speak to somebody at the end.
Yeah, that might be good. Yeah.
Say what we're doing, and then maybe, I don't know if we said what we're doing, then maybe or just be like, hi, we're music students, we wanted to come and see how it is,
You don't necessarily need to do that, because then it becomes more of an interview, doesn't it? I think in a sense it's just to kind of put yourself in that situation and see what happens, in a sense. An interesting thing is, do other people talk to you? Are there spontaneous conversations that happen during? I imagine there'll be an interval, and that in itself might be a strange thing. But do people talk to each other spontaneously during the interval? It's not like you will necessarily have conversation with other people, but looking around, are people talking to each other? And what does that say about kind of
sort of like the type of audience that's there?
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll probably find you
might be the others.
I mean, when I go to classical gigs, and one thing I like about them, I feel very young when I go to a classical gig. I kind of think, I'm young, because almost everyone is retired. I don't know if that will be your experience.
Well, from the picture.
Yeah. They look all like dressed up.
It's like Ribston School or something.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so you might find school children and parents there as well, perhaps.
Maybe.
Anyway.
I don't know if it's just the hall though. I don't know.
In terms of secondary research, it's kind of, this is a slightly tricky one. But I suppose, it's trying to find things that might sort of feed into your analysis. And I suppose for me, it's kind of stuff about the real fundamentals of music. A book that I really liked, and I think we've got it in the library, but we might not. You might find it online. Maybe I haven't got it anymore. No, sorry about that.
So
this is the kind of.
Should we like find a book about choirs?
Or something about the significance of music in terms of bringing people together. I'm trying to think. There was a book that I definitely.
Okay. Well, I think it'd be good for my students to be able to see that as well. Because what we're trying to do with them at the moment is take them through the idea of developmental research.
I'm not quite sure about this one, to be honest. It might.
To show them how we iterate.
It's a slightly difficult one to find.
So a bit like music in the community.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose that a lot of these kinds of sources are from a field that's a bit niche, but ethnomusicology, which is basically anthropology of music. You kind of considering kind of different music cultures. Kind of
good, thanks. Good.
Like churches and
there's someone called John Blacking. Now I don't know if you might find his work online if you like Google books. He's got a book called, it's a slightly very old-fashioned title, How Musical Is Man? By that he means humans, but John Blacking talks about how music creates a sense of fellow feeling, and it brings people together. It's maybe a basic point, but it's a kind of key insight in terms of kind of how particularly live musical events work. They create a sense of sort of camaraderie in a way that if you go to a party, you might feel that, oh God, I don't want to talk to them, or oh God, it's so much effort, like having conversation with loads of people I don't know, that kind of thing. But somehow sitting in a room together, listening to music, even if it can bring people together without the need for conversation. Yeah. So, try and find things.
So like music can
about
connect
that.
people.
Without actually.
Community music.
Talking.
You're right. There are probably kind of lots of resources in the library. Those kinds of resources where people talk about how live music brings people together. You need just a short quotation about that. Mm-hmm. Feed it into your analysis. So does that?
And a quote, well, like it backs us up, but I never get it right. Like, so would you put your quote at the top and say this backs my point up this way, or do you like leave the quote further down so you can write your point and then you like blah blah blah, this quote was said then to back my point up?
Either's fine.
Yeah, I suppose.
I think the trick is either way you want to try and weave it in so it's nicely integrated. For example, in the I don't know what this choral gig's going to be like, but we'll find out. But imagine, for argument's sake, that there's a sense of everyone kind of feeling as one. A sense of kind of because of this lovely music, strangers are impelled to talk to each other and have spontaneous kind of nice, positive interactions with each other. You kind of describe that and say this reinforces kind of whoever, Joe or Jane Bloggs' point that music creates a sense of fellow feeling or a sense of kind of collective identity. Or you can say, so-and-so says music creates a sense of collective identity. This was shown to be the case at this gig because, etc.
And it's fine that we're going to have the same work.
That's fine. Yeah, as long
doing
as
it separately, but we're going to.
As long as it's not the same words on the page.
Yeah,
that's fine.
And then, so we're doing 3 different research tasks, obviously. So you write about one. You don't have to link it to the other. You write about one, then the other, and then the other.
They're standalone pieces. You don't need to link
all
them.
on the same thing.
So we have to put like our first research was this, and then the second research
no,
task
you can just say,
or just
go straight
into it.
So kind of think that it's like 3 different pieces of work just on the same.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do a conclusion about all.
No.
So we won't have much of a bibliography because it's only going to be the 2.
Yeah,
How many quotes do we need? Like 1, 2?
1 or 2 per piece.
So they're not. It's not like the most important.
No, I think that the trick is to go for quality. Really, make sure they're library books, and then you're on safe ground.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, and make sure you reference them using the Harvard system.
Yeah.
And then you're on safe ground. There isn't, these are very short pieces of writing, so I'm not expecting
Loads.
I would say that often with kind of secondary research, you have to do, it's a kind of like a process of kind of sieving or filtering, where you kind of read more than you have to, just to find out as much as you can.
Okay.
And then when it comes to actually writing, you think actually this is the most relevant thing.
So the secondary research bit would be like the last paragraph. Do you have to conclude it?
Not
really.
Possibly. I mean,
a sentence or two.
Yeah. I think the secondary research, it could be something that you kind of weave. It could come in halfway through, it could come in at the top, or it could come in at the end. I mean, there isn't a necessarily right or wrong way of doing it, as long as it feels like it's integrated. You know, that there's a clear connection between, you know, your primary research, your analysis, and what other people say on, you know, the same sort of topic. As long as there's, what you don't want to do is have a quote that's hanging in midair, and then, you know, there's no, you know, and then there's no obvious connection to what you're saying afterwards. Just to avoid that.
Okay.
That's the main thing.
Okay. All right.
Does that sound okay?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
harmonised a bit.
Good.